Indroduction. It's the best show. It's better than anything I've watched about Jesus. And if you haven't seen the series, you really should check it out. I'll make sure I put a link to the show in the description below. Now, I've done a few videos about the song Trouble, which is from the show, and today I want to try to show you how to play the guitar solo from that song. If you'd like to listen to the real song, I also put a link to it in the description below. First, I'll give you some information about the guitar solo. The recording itself was definitely played with a slide, and I'm not much of a slide player, so I decided to do a version that represents the recording but without the slide. And since I'm not playing it with a slide, there are a few differences, but I'd say I've got it sounding about 90% the same as the slide version. I'm pretty sure Matt Nelson played the solo on the song, and I've really become impressed with him as a guitar player. His feel and his chops, they're really impressive. I was also pleasantly surprised as I dug into the solo. I found out it's not filled with all your typical blues rock licks. It's got some really interesting and very musical note choices in there. I'm not used to hearing that so much in a blues or rock guitar solo. The guitar itself has a nice thick overdriven tone, and it was probably played on a jazz type electric guitar, but I'd say if you use a neck humbucker with some distortion that you'll be in the ballpark tonally. So let's jump into it. So your first note is a big high E with a lot of vibrato that sustains over the first two chords. The note is on the second string, 17th fret. I like to do a little slide up to the note. You pick the note on each beat while continuing the vibrato. Now, this is a lot of vibrato, so don't be shy about it. Don't give it one of these little shakes like this. You really got to dig in with the vibrato and emphasize this note. The next note happens on beat 4, and you move down to a B on the third string, 16th fret. I usually end up playing the B and the E at the same time, but because they sound good together and they fit over the chord, I just go with it. Now, if you want to be strict about it, you could just play the B by itself, like this. Now, when you hit this B, you've got to immediately start sliding down towards the nut, because the next little while you're going to be doing all your playing down here. I usually end up around the 3rd fret because that's where your next note is. Now, don't hold the note when you get down to the 3rd fret like this. you want to simultaneously let off the string as you reach the 3rd fret. This causes the note to kind of fade out, which is what you want. I usually find I'm letting off the string around the 5th fret or so, but it doesn't need to be precise. You're not playing a new note down here, you're just playing the end of the B that you started up here on the 16th fret. The next note is a G on the 1st string, 3rd fret. And you probably want to play it with your 3rd finger because you end up needing that finger in a second. You start on the G and you immediately slide up 2 frets to the A on the 5th fret and then do a slight bend. Now the bend only goes up a half step, but take your time getting there because it lasts for almost 3 beats. The next note is the G on the 3rd fret, which means you have to release the bend with your 3rd finger and immediately hit the G with your 1st finger. Now, you don't want to still have the string bent when you play the G, so make sure you fully release the bend before you play the G. Now you might be asking, how can you have the string bent when you've already let off with your 3rd finger? But when most people bend a string, they're using 2 or 3 fingers to do the bend. So you just have to make sure that your 1st finger has released any of the bend that it might have left on the string. This is what it sounds like when you still have a little bend left in it with your 1st finger. Just make sure your 1st finger is relaxed and playing the G without any bend in the string. So here's what we've got so far. The next phrase is 3 notes with a bend. You start on the E on the 2nd string, 5th fret. Then a B on the open 2nd string. Then the next note is a D that bends back up to an E but from the 3rd fret. Now I recommend using your 3rd finger for this, which means you gotta shift down 2 frets while you're playing the open B. Playing the open B gives you plenty of time to shift and get ready for the bend. Now you got to make sure this bend makes it all the way up to the E, but also doesn't go sharp. It can be a little tricky if you don't do a lot of bending, and it might take a little bit of practice, but just listen for it when you get to the E and don't go any higher. A little exercise you can do to practice this is bend the note, then check it on the 5th fret to make sure you got it right. If you get the bend wrong, you can hear it pretty clearly. Again, you got to make sure you bend it just right up to the E, because if you don't, it sticks out like a sore thumb. This bend can be tough because it's down here close to the nut, and the strings have a lot of tension down here, so it really helps to use 3 fingers for this bend. Try to get your 2nd finger right behind the 3rd finger to help push that note up to pitch, and also use your 1st finger too. If you try this bend with just 1 finger, you're probably going to hurt yourself, so make sure you use your other fingers to make it easier. Now, after you bend to the E, you're going to need to release the bend back down to a D. Don't pick it again like this. Just release it back down to the D without picking it. Now the next phrase is a little tricky because you need to pick the note and slide up 2 frets to the next note and then bend that note another full step. So you're really moving 2 full steps on this phrase. You start on the 3rd fret and you immediately slide up to the 5th fret and then immediately bend up a full step to the F sharp. You hold it for a bit before releasing the bend back to the E and then pick the D on the 3rd fret. It should be a fluid bend and release right back into the D. Don't pause on the E like this. You want the released bend to flow right into the D. So I'll play the last section all together so you can see and hear how it works. And now I'll play everything we've got so far to this point. Okay, so the next part is a little run of notes, and it's pretty straightforward, but it's a little faster and it has more notes than the previous sections. So I'll do the full run and then we'll break it down. From the last section, we ended up with our first finger on the 2nd string, 3rd fret. And the run begins with a little pull off to the open B string with your first finger. Then you pick with your 2nd finger back on the 3rd fret, which begins the run. The reason you switch fingers is because during the run you need 3 fingers, and if you start the run with your first finger you'll have to do a quick switch at some point, but if you switch here at the start of the run you'll have plenty of time with the pull off into the B string. Now obviously if you feel more comfortable fretting it differently than I'm showing here, then you should. These are just suggestions that work well in general and they work well for me, but you might find it easier to do it differently. The first 4 notes of the run are pretty straightforward. You start with the 2nd string, 3rd fret, then you pull off into the open 2nd string, and then you pick the 3rd string, 3rd fret, and then pull off to the open 3rd string. Now pick the 4th string, 4th fret with your 3rd finger and then pull off to the 2nd fret, which will be your 1st finger, and then pull that off to the open 4th string. The last note of the run is the 5th string, 2nd fret with your 1st finger. Now here is the full run again. Something to keep in mind when you're doing this run is that it's not a straight feel, it's a swing feel. So for example, a straight feel of this run would be, but we want to use some swing on this run, and that's going to sound something like this. So definitely keep that in mind while you're running down the notes in this section. The whole solo, in fact the whole song is played with a swing feel, but this section with the solo especially needs to swing to make it sound right. Now, after the B note is picked on the 5th string, you need to do a little slide up to the 4th string, 7th fret. Now, you don't have to be too picky about where you start the slide with your 3rd finger. I usually start around the 4th or 5th fret, but it happens so quickly you don't really even notice where the slide begins. So as long as you land on the 7th fret, it doesn't matter too much where you start. Now with the same finger, in my case the 3rd finger, you go back down to the 5th fret and pick the G here. You probably want to be using your third finger for both of these notes because you're going to need your first finger quickly after you play those notes. So let's do the previous run and these notes following all together. Next, you play a little lick on the 5th string, 2nd fret with the first finger, then jump up to the open 4th string. You'll actually need this lick 4 times, but it'll be in combination with different endings. After that little lick, you play the 4th fret with the 3rd finger and do a half step bend up to the D. And you actually would do the little bend up to the D twice. And you technically would do a little mute between the bends with your pick because you don't want to hear the note being released back down to the 4th fret. Here's what it sounds like without the muting between the bends. It's a subtle thing, but it helps separate the two bends so you can hear both clearly. Next, you repeat exactly what you just played. So you'll do this lick twice, just like this. Next is a combination of some notes that you played already to this point. You do the little lick on the 5th string, 2nd fret, and the open 4th string. But then you do that slide with the 3rd finger up to the 7th fret that we did earlier. And if you're comfortable with it and you have enough time, you can put a little vibrato on that note. So that whole lick sounds like this. Then you do the little 5th string, 2nd fret to the open 4th string lick again. And then on the 3rd string, 2nd fret, pick that note and slide up to the 4th fret and then pick the open 3rd string after that. And you can use any finger that you want for this part. I use my middle finger, but you could also use your first finger because you're only going to use the one finger for this section of the solo. After picking the open 3rd string, you pick the 4th string, 2nd fret, and then the 5th string, 2nd fret. Then you play the open 4th string, and then the 2nd fret, then back down to the 5th string, 2nd fret. Now that's a lot of jumping strings and sliding and such. One thing to keep in mind when you're jumping from the 4th string to the 5th string is you have to roll your finger so that the string that you want is ringing and the string that you don't want to ring is not ringing. Now I notice a lot of the times when I'm playing the solo, I don't always quite get the last note on the 5th string, 2nd fret. And it's not a prominent sounding note, so if you miss it, that's okay. So, that whole lick again. Now, after you play that lick, you want to do a big slide up to the 12th fret. It doesn't really matter where you start the slide as long as it's down here around the nut. I usually start on the 1st fret, but as long as you stop up here at the 12th fret, it doesn't really matter exactly where you start playing. The point is that you hear a big slide from the lower notes up to the 12th fret, which creates a really nice slide effect. Now you probably want to do that slide with your first finger because you're going to need your 3rd or 4th finger soon after that. So that's 2nd string, 12th fret with the first finger, then jump up to the 1st string, 12th fret with the same finger. You'll typically play with the fingertip on the 2nd string and then use the pad of your finger for the 1st string. After you play those two notes, you play the 2nd string, 15th fret, and when you pick that note, you want to bend it up a full step. After the bend on the 15th fret, you go straight to the 12th fret. You don't want to hear the bend release like this. You just want to hear the note bend up and stop, and the next note that you hear is the B on the 12th fret. Next is the 3rd string 14th fret, which you pick and then bend up a full step, then mute the note with your pick as you release the bend, and then pick the 14th fret again. Then immediately after that, pick the 12th fret. And I find that if you give this note a small bend, it really adds some flavor. It's not essential though, so if you don't do it, it's not a big deal. The last note is the 4th string 14th fret, which you want to give it some nice vibrato and sustain it for about a bar or so. So that whole section is. And that's the end. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you liked the video and you don't mind clicking the thumbs up button, that helps out a lot. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. And if you have any suggestions, questions, or requests, let me know in the comments below. Have a good one.